Single dad was refused a room at his own hotel. The entire staff was fired immediately. They looked at the tired single dad standing quietly in the hotel lobby and decided he didn't belong there. His worn jacket, travel-worn boots, and little daughter holding his hand were all they needed to judge him. One by one, the front desk staff refused to give him a room, security was called, and the manager demanded that he leave immediately. No one imagined that the quiet man they were humiliating was the owner of the very hotel they were trying to throw out. And within the hour, every employee involved would face a decision that would change their lives forever. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Before we dive into today's story, I'd like to ask you for a quick favor. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you'll always be the first to know when we upload a new video. It only takes a moment, costs nothing, and is one of the best ways to help us continue creating touching and unforgettable stories for you. We truly appreciate your support. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Share your city or country in the comments below so we can say hello to viewers from around the world. Thank you so much for being here. Now, without further ado, let's return to our main character and begin today's story. The easiest way to measure a person's character is to watch how they treat someone they believe has no power. The rain came down in steady sheets, turning the glowing entrance of the Grand Brookstone Hotel into a shimmering reflection of gold against the wet pavement. Luxury sedans rolled beneath the porte-cochere while valets hurried through the drizzle with umbrellas raised high, greeting every arriving guest with polished smiles and rehearsed warmth. Just beyond the line of expensive cars, an aging blue pickup eased quietly to the curb. The engine rattled once before falling silent. Nathan Brooks rested both hands on the steering wheel for a brief moment, breathing in the familiar scent of leather, coffee, and rain that lingered inside the truck. Beside him, his 9-year-old daughter, Lily, hugged a faded, stuffed rabbit against her sweater and looked through the windshield with wide blue eyes. "Is this really where we're staying tonight, Daddy?" she asked softly. Nathan smiled, the kind of smile that carried equal parts exhaustion and affection. "That's the plan, sweetheart." She grinned. "It's beautiful." He nodded. "Yes, it is." He stepped out into the rain first, walking around to open her door before holding his old canvas jacket above her head to shield her from the weather. His jeans were damp from a long day on the road, and his brown work boots carried traces of mud collected from construction sites and hotel inspections across 3 different states. His jacket had seen better years, its sleeves slightly faded and its zipper replaced twice. Nothing about him suggested wealth. Nothing about him suggested authority. He simply looked like another hard-working father trying to keep his little girl dry on a rainy evening. Together they walked through the revolving doors into the magnificent marble lobby. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across polished floors. A grand piano rested near the fireplace while quiet jazz floated gently through hidden speakers. Fresh white lilies perfumed the air. Guests wearing tailored suits and elegant dresses crossed the lobby with rolling luggage, barely noticing the father and daughter entering with raindrops clinging to their clothes. Behind the front desk, 3 employees exchanged quick glances before forcing polite but guarded smiles. Nathan approached with calm confidence. "Good evening," he said warmly. "I'd like a room for my daughter and me." The young receptionist looked him up and down before her smile faded almost imperceptibly. Her eyes paused on his worn boots, then on Lily's backpack, then on the old pickup visible through the glass entrance. She tapped a few keys without asking his name. "I'm sorry, sir," she replied in a flat professional voice. "We're fully booked tonight." Nathan glanced across the spacious lobby where several guests were still checking in. He noticed room keys being handed out only a few feet away. His expression never changed. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "I don't mind waiting. If a room is being prepared." The receptionist folded her hands together. "I'm very sure." Another employee leaned toward her and whispered something that made both of them suppress small smiles. Lily squeezed her father's hand just a little tighter. Nathan looked down at her and smiled reassuringly before returning his attention to the desk. His voice remained steady, almost impossibly calm. "That's all right," he said. "Could I please speak with the manager?" The receptionist held Nathan's calm gaze for only a second before looking away, as though meeting his eyes required more honesty than she intended to offer. "Our manager is busy," she said crisply. "I am afraid there is nothing more we can do for you this evening." Nathan gave a small nod, neither disappointed nor offended. I understand everyone has a busy night, he replied. I can wait. Lily quietly shifted closer to her father, her little sneakers leaving faint rain prints across the polished marble floor. She looked around at the enormous lobby, fascinated by the sparkling chandelier above them and the crackling fireplace beyond the sitting area. Daddy, she whispered, can we sit over there while we wait? Nathan smiled. Of course we can. Before they could take more than a few steps, another employee hurried around the counter. His name tag read Trevor. He folded his arms across his neatly pressed uniform. Sir, he said firmly, those seats are reserved for registered guests. Nathan stopped immediately. I was simply waiting to speak with the manager. Trevor forced a thin smile that never reached his eyes. As my coworker explained, there are no rooms available. Nathan remained perfectly composed. Then perhaps the manager can confirm that personally. Trevor glanced toward the front desk where two receptionists exchanged amused looks. One quietly muttered something that caused the other to hide a laugh behind her hand. Nathan noticed everything but reacted to nothing. Years of leading thousands of employees had taught him that people often revealed their character when they believed no one important was watching. Lily looked up at him with quiet confusion. Did we do something wrong, she asked in a voice barely louder than the soft piano music drifting through the lobby. Nathan knelt beside her until they were eye level. He gently brushed a damp strand of blonde hair away from her face. No, sweetheart, he said with complete certainty. We always treat people with kindness. Sometimes they are having a difficult day. She nodded, trusting every word he spoke. Across the lobby, several guests had begun noticing the conversation. A middle-aged couple paused beside the elevators. A businessman lowered his phone. An elderly woman sitting near the fireplace watched silently over the top of her novel. The atmosphere had changed almost without anyone realizing it. The cheerful rhythm of arriving guests slowed as curiosity quietly replaced conversation. At that moment, the evening operations manager emerged from a nearby office carrying a tablet. His tailored charcoal suit looked flawless, and his polished shoes reflected the marble beneath every step. His silver name badge identified him as Daniel Mercer. Trevor immediately straightened. Mr. Mercer, he called. This gentleman refuses to leave after being informed that we cannot accommodate him. Mercer studied Nathan for only a brief moment before reaching his own conclusion. His expression hardened with practiced efficiency rather than compassion. Sir, he said evenly, our employees have already explained the situation. Nathan offered a courteous smile. I only requested a conversation. Mercer folded his tablet beneath one arm. And I am telling you exactly what they told you. We have no vacancy. Nathan glanced toward another receptionist who was handing fresh room keys to a newly arrived family. The children laughed as a bell attendant loaded their luggage onto a polished brass cart. Nathan returned his attention to Mercer. It appears several guests are still checking in. Mercer did not even look behind him. Those reservations were made in advance. Nathan nodded slowly. I see. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. May I ask one more question? Mercer sighed quietly, clearly impatient. Make it brief. Nathan looked around the magnificent lobby that he had once imagined as a place where every traveler, regardless of appearance, would be welcomed with dignity. Then he asked in the same respectful tone he had used from the beginning, is this truly the standard of hospitality your team has chosen to represent tonight? Respect is never tested when life is easy. It is tested when someone believes you have nothing to offer. Daniel Mercer allowed a slow smile to form, but there was no warmth behind it. Our standard is to protect the experience of our paying guests, he replied. I believe we have made ourselves perfectly clear. Nathan studied the manager for a quiet moment. There was no anger in his face, only disappointment so subtle that most people would have missed it. Thank you for answering honestly, he said. Mercer interpreted the response as surrender. Then I suggest you and your daughter find another place for the evening. Lily looked from one adult to another. She could not understand why every smile in the lobby suddenly felt cold. She tightened her grip on her stuffed rabbit and asked softly, Daddy, are all hotels like this? Nathan gently rested his hand on her shoulder. No, sweetheart. Most people try their best. Sometimes we simply meet someone on a difficult day. His answer was so calm that even the elderly woman near the fireplace lowered her book and watched more closely. Nathan reached into his jacket, and removed his wallet. Trevor immediately stepped forward. If you are going to ask for money to help pay for another room somewhere else, we cannot do that. Nathan slowly shook his head. That was not my intention. He opened the worn leather wallet and looked briefly at an old family photograph tucked inside. It showed him, Lily as a toddler, and his late wife smiling beneath a bright summer sky years earlier. He quietly returned the photograph to its place before closing the wallet again without removing a single card. He had reached for the picture, not the money. Lily noticed and smiled gently. She always knew why her father carried it everywhere they traveled. Across the lobby, a young bell attendant named Michael had been silently observing everything. He had worked at the hotel for only 3 months and still believed hospitality meant more than polished marble and expensive chandeliers. He stepped closer to Mercer and spoke in a careful voice. Sir, perhaps we could at least offer them bottled water while they wait. The little girl looks tired. Mercer turned sharply toward him. Return to your station. Michael hesitated. But that was not a suggestion, Mercer interrupted. Michael lowered his eyes and quietly wheeled an empty luggage cart toward the entrance, though his expression revealed that his conscience remained behind. Nathan noticed the young employee's kindness and offered him a grateful nod. Michael returned the gesture almost invisibly before continuing his work. It was a tiny moment, easily missed by everyone else, but Nathan never forgot small acts of character. Rain continued tapping softly against the towering glass windows while the pianist began playing a slower melody that drifted gently through the lobby. The luxurious room suddenly felt strangely silent despite the movement of guests and employees. A businessman checking into the hotel frowned as he watched another family receive room keys without delay. He quietly glanced back toward Nathan, clearly wondering why the same courtesy had not been extended to him. Mercer sensed the growing attention and decided the conversation had lasted long enough. Security will escort you outside if necessary, he said firmly. Nathan looked at him with the same calm expression he had worn since entering the building. There will be no need for that, he answered. I have no interest in causing discomfort for anyone here. He reached into his jacket pocket once more, this time removing a simple black smartphone. Without changing his expression, he unlocked the screen, scrolled through a short list of contacts, and selected a single number that had not been called in several weeks. As the phone rang quietly against his ear, he looked out through the rain-covered glass toward the dark parking lot, his voice remaining almost gentle when someone finally answered. Good evening, he said. Could you come to the Grand Brookstone Hotel? I believe it is time for us to have a conversation about how our guests are being welcomed. The call lasted less than 10 seconds. Nathan ended it with a quiet, thank you. I will be here, slipped the phone back into his jacket, and returned his full attention to Lily, as though nothing unusual had happened. Daniel Mercer watched the exchange with obvious skepticism before letting out a faint chuckle. Well, he said, folding his arms, whoever you called is not going to change hotel policy. Nathan answered with the same calm voice that had never once risen above conversation level. Perhaps not, but the truth has a way of arriving exactly when it is needed. Trevor exchanged another amused glance with the receptionists. Did he call a lawyer? One whispered. Maybe a travel agency. The other replied with a quiet laugh. Their comments were soft, but not soft enough to escape the ears of nearby guests. Several people waiting in line shifted uncomfortably. The businessman who had been watching from the check-in line quietly stepped aside and pretended to check messages on his phone. Instead, he opened his camera and began recording from a respectful distance. He was not looking for entertainment. Something about the father's composure felt important, as though the story unfolding in front of him deserved to be remembered exactly as it happened. Near the fireplace, the elderly woman slowly closed her novel and stood. She walked toward Lily with gentle steps and smiled warmly. Young lady, she said kindly, would you like a piece of peppermint candy? I always carry some for my grandchildren. Lily looked up at Nathan before answering. He nodded with a grateful smile. That would be very nice. Thank you. The woman handed her the wrapped candy. You have a wonderful father, she whispered. Lily smiled proudly. I know. The simple exchange lasted only a few seconds, yet it reminded everyone watching that kindness required no permission. Michael, the young bell attendant, noticed it too. Quietly, without drawing attention to himself, he disappeared through a service door and returned carrying 2 sealed bottles of water. He approached Nathan carefully. "Sir," he said in a low voice, "I know I was told not to, but I thought your daughter might be thirsty." Nathan accepted 1 bottle for Lily while gently placing the other back into Michael's hands. "She will appreciate this," he said. "Please keep the second one for yourself. You have had a long evening too." Michael blinked in surprise. Very few guests had ever thanked him. Even fewer had considered his own well-being. "Thank you, sir," he replied quietly. Mercer noticed the interaction immediately. "Michael," he called sharply, "I believe I instructed you to return to your duties." "Yes, sir," Michael answered before stepping away. Nathan watched the young employee leave, making a silent note of both his name and his character. Outside, the steady rain finally began to slow. The glass entrance reflected flashing headlights as several vehicles passed along the boulevard. Inside, the pianist finished 1 song and began another, its gentle melody filling the growing silence that now stretched across the lobby. Fewer people were speaking. More people were watching. Even the receptionist had stopped smiling quite as confidently as before. Then, through the tall front windows, a line of black sport utility vehicles turned slowly beneath the hotel entrance canopy. They moved with quiet precision before stopping one after another along the curb. Uniformed chauffeurs stepped out almost simultaneously, opening rear doors with practiced professionalism. Mercer frowned. "Who is arriving at this hour?" he murmured. Trevor straightened his tie. The receptionists hurried to organize the front desk. Every employee instinctively prepared to welcome what appeared to be an important group of executives. Nathan remained exactly where he was, 1 hand resting gently on Lily's shoulder, his expression unchanged. As the first distinguished figure stepped out beneath a large black umbrella and walked toward the revolving doors with calm purpose, Nathan simply smiled, almost as though he had been expecting an old friend all along. The revolving doors turned slowly, and the conversation throughout the lobby seemed to fade into the background. Every employee instinctively straightened their posture, expecting an influential guest whose arrival demanded flawless hospitality. The first man to enter was in his early 60s, dressed in a tailored navy suit with a silver umbrella still glistening from the rain. Behind him walked 2 women carrying leather portfolios, followed by 3 executives in dark business attire. Their pace was calm, purposeful, and remarkably quiet. Daniel Mercer stepped forward with a polished smile that had been missing only moments earlier. "Good evening," he said confidently. "Welcome to the Grand Brookstone Hotel. We are honored to have you with us." The distinguished gentleman acknowledged the greeting with a brief nod, but did not stop walking. Instead, his eyes moved carefully across the lobby until they settled on Nathan. For the briefest moment, surprise crossed his face before transforming into genuine relief. Nathan gave the slightest shake of his head, almost too subtle for anyone else to notice. It was not a greeting. It was a request to wait. The gentleman understood immediately and continued walking as though nothing unusual had happened. Mercer blinked in confusion. "Sir, may I assist you with your check-in?" he asked. The visitor smiled politely. "In just a moment." He continued toward the seating area, speaking quietly with the executives accompanying him while occasionally glancing toward Nathan without revealing any sign of recognition. Lily tugged gently on her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you know those people?" Nathan looked down at her with the same peaceful expression he had carried all evening. "We have met before," he answered simply. "Then why did they not come over?" she asked. Nathan smiled. "Because sometimes patience tells the truth better than introductions." Lily nodded, even though she did not fully understand. She had learned long ago that her father rarely explained everything immediately. He believed people should have the opportunity to reveal who they truly were without interruption. Across the lobby, the businessman recording with his phone quietly adjusted his position, sensing that something important was about to unfold. The elderly woman returned to her chair, but kept watching with growing curiosity. Even Trevor noticed that the visitors seemed strangely interested in the father he had dismissed only minutes earlier. Mercer approached the distinguished gentleman once more. "Sir, if there is anything you require, my staff will be happy to assist you." The gentleman offered another courteous smile. "Actually, there is. I am waiting for someone." "Certainly," Mercer replied. "May I ask who?" The man glanced across the marble floor toward Nathan before answering in an even voice. "The person I came to meet has already arrived." Mercer followed his line of sight, but quickly dismissed the possibility. Surely he was referring to another executive who had not yet entered the building. Trevor leaned toward one of the receptionists and quietly whispered, "There is no way they could mean him." She nodded confidently. "Not a chance." Nathan remained completely still beside Lily, neither attempting to attract attention nor avoid it. His composure was almost unsettling. There was no triumph in his expression, no desire to embarrass anyone, only the quiet confidence of a man who had nothing to prove because the truth did not depend on anyone's opinion. Outside, another pair of black vehicles pulled beneath the entrance canopy. More professionally dressed men and women stepped out, carrying briefcases and garment bags. A valet hurried to open the doors while another employee whispered in astonishment, "That looks like the corporate leadership team." Mercer felt a small knot form in his stomach. Corporate executives almost never arrived without advance notice, and certainly not in numbers like this. For the first time that evening, uncertainty replaced confidence. He looked once more toward Nathan, who simply rested a reassuring hand on Lily's shoulder and quietly waited as the final pieces of the evening began falling into place. The lobby had become unusually quiet. Even the gentle piano music seemed softer as every pair of eyes followed the growing group of executives gathering near the entrance. Daniel Mercer adjusted his tie once more, forcing confidence back into his expression. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with polished enthusiasm, "welcome. We are honored by your visit. Please allow us to prepare our executive lounge." One of the women carrying a leather portfolio smiled politely. "That will not be necessary." Another executive checked his watch before looking toward the distinguished gentleman who had entered first. It was clear they were waiting for his lead. He finally turned away from the seating area and walked calmly across the marble floor. Every employee assumed he was approaching the front desk. Instead, he continued past Mercer without slowing. Trevor stepped aside automatically. The receptionists exchanged uncertain glances. The gentleman stopped only when he stood directly in front of Nathan. For one long second, no one spoke. Then, with complete sincerity, the man extended both hands and smiled warmly. "Good evening, Mr. Brooks. I apologize that it took us a few minutes to arrive." Nathan accepted the handshake with quiet kindness. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Richard." A wave of silence swept across the lobby. Daniel Mercer's confident posture disappeared almost instantly. Trevor stared without blinking. One receptionist quietly dropped the stack of registration cards she had been organizing. Lily looked up at the distinguished gentleman and smiled. "Hello." Richard's face softened immediately. "And hello to you, Miss Lily. It is wonderful to see you again." Lily smiled even wider. "Daddy said you might come." Richard laughed gently. "Your father usually knows exactly when to call." Mercer finally found his voice. "Excuse me," he interrupted cautiously. "You know this gentleman?" Richard slowly turned toward him. "Know him," he repeated. "I have worked beside him for nearly 12 years. Mercer swallowed. "I am sorry, but may I ask exactly who he is?" Richard looked back at Nathan, almost asking permission with his eyes. Nathan gave a small nod. Nothing more. Richard faced the staff once again. "This is Nathan Brooks, founder of Brooks Hospitality, majority owner of this hotel, and chairman of the entire company." No one moved. The words seemed too impossible to process. The chandeliers still glowed overhead. Rain still traced quiet lines down the towering windows. The fireplace continued burning peacefully. Yet, somehow the entire atmosphere had changed. The lobby that had been filled with whispered judgments only minutes earlier now held nothing but complete silence. Mercer slowly looked from Nathan's worn boots to his faded jacket, then back to his calm face. Every assumption he had made collapsed at once. Trevor instinctively took one small step backward. Neither receptionist could bring herself to speak. Nathan remained exactly the same man he had been since walking through the revolving doors. His clothes had not changed. His voice had not changed. His posture had not changed. Only the truth had finally arrived. Richard continued in a measured tone. "Mr. Brooks spent the last 3 weeks personally visiting our properties without advance notice. He believes the best way to understand a guest's experience is to arrive exactly as any ordinary traveler would." Another executive quietly opened a portfolio containing inspection reports while 2 others exchanged solemn looks. Richard added, "Tonight was never intended to become an inspection. It became one because of the decisions made after Mr. Brooks walked through those doors. Nathan gently placed his hand on Lily's shoulder before looking around the silent lobby. His expression held no anger, no satisfaction, and no desire to humiliate anyone. He simply spoke with the quiet dignity that had guided him from the beginning. I came here hoping to find the same kindness we promise every guest. Let us discover together whether we have kept that promise. No one attempted to explain themselves. No one reached for an excuse. The silence filling the lobby was heavier than any accusation because every person standing behind the front desk knew exactly what had happened. Nathan looked around the room with calm eyes before speaking again. "Richard," he said gently, "would you please ask that the lobby security footage from the last 30 minutes be displayed?" Richard nodded immediately. "Of course, Mr. Brooks." One of the technology specialists accompanying the executive team quietly walked toward the reception office. Daniel Mercer instinctively stepped forward. "Sir, I can explain." Nathan politely raised one hand, not to silence him, but to ask for patience. "Please do not explain yet," he replied. "Let us begin with the facts. After that, everyone will have an opportunity to speak." His voice remained steady and respectful. There was no anger hidden beneath his words. That made the moment even more uncomfortable. Within minutes, a large display normally used for conference presentations illuminated behind the reception desk. The recorded footage appeared with a precise timestamp. The executives watched without saying a word. Guests standing throughout the lobby naturally stepped back, giving everyone an unobstructed view. The recording showed Nathan and Lily entering through the revolving doors, rain still falling behind them. It captured Nathan smiling as he approached the front desk. The audio clearly recorded his first words. "Good evening. I would like a room for my daughter and me." Then came the response. "We are fully booked." Seconds later, another camera angle revealed a different receptionist checking in several newly arrived guests. Room keys were handed across the counter only moments after Nathan had supposedly been told no rooms remained. Richard quietly made a note. The footage continued. Trevor refusing to let Lily sit near the fireplace. Mercer arriving. Michael offering water despite being instructed not to. The elderly woman sharing a peppermint candy with Lily. Every moment unfolded exactly as it had happened. There was nothing dramatic about the recording. That was precisely what made it so powerful. It showed ordinary decisions made by ordinary people, one after another, each revealing character more clearly than words ever could. Nathan watched without changing expression. He had already lived every second of it. He did not need the video to prove anything to himself. It was there simply to protect the truth. When the recording ended, the screen faded to black. Richard slowly closed his notebook. Another executive quietly spoke for the first time. "The occupancy report for tonight shows 18 premium rooms remained available when Mr. Brooks arrived." A second executive opened another document. There were no reservation restrictions preventing those rooms from being assigned. Mercer lowered his eyes. Trevor stared at the marble floor. Neither receptionist attempted to deny what everyone had just witnessed. Nathan finally broke the silence. "Hospitality begins long before a room key is handed to a guest," he said softly. "It begins the moment someone walks through the front door hoping to be treated with dignity." He turned toward Michael, who still stood near the luggage carts. "You offered water to a child after being told not to." "Thank you." Michael looked genuinely surprised. "I only thought it was the right thing to do, sir." Nathan smiled warmly. "That is exactly why it mattered." He then looked toward the elderly woman sitting quietly beside the fireplace. "And thank you for reminding all of us that kindness never requires a job title." She placed a hand over her heart and smiled. Around the lobby, guests who had witnessed the entire evening slowly nodded in agreement. No applause followed. No dramatic celebration interrupted the silence. There was only a growing understanding that the true measure of a hotel had never been its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, or elegant suites. It had always been the simple choice to treat every person who entered its doors with equal respect, especially when no one believed that person had the power to change their future. Nathan allowed the silence to remain for several long seconds. No one interrupted it because no one could. Every person standing in the lobby had just witnessed the same truth from the same camera, and no explanation could erase what had already happened. Richard closed the inspection file and looked toward Nathan. "Mr. Brooks," he said respectfully, The executive team is prepared to implement whatever decision you believe is appropriate. Nathan nodded once before looking at Lily. She had finished her peppermint candy and was quietly holding the empty wrapper in her hand. "Sweetheart," he asked gently, "would you throw that away for me?" She smiled. "Of course, Daddy." Michael immediately noticed the nearest wastebasket was several yards away. Before anyone else could move, he quietly walked over, held the lid open, and waited. Lily thanked him with a bright smile before dropping the wrapper inside. "You are welcome," Michael replied. Nathan watched the simple exchange and smiled. "Kindness is often found in the smallest moments," he said softly. "People who notice little needs are usually the ones who can be trusted with greater responsibilities." Michael lowered his eyes, humbled by the compliment. Nathan then turned back toward the reception desk. Daniel Mercer finally spoke again, his confident voice replaced by genuine regret. "Mr. Brooks, I judged you by your appearance. I failed you, your daughter, and every principle this company represents. I have no excuse." Nathan studied him quietly before answering. "Thank you for telling the truth." Mercer looked surprised. He had expected anger. Instead, he had received acknowledgement. Nathan continued. "Character begins to change the moment excuses end." Trevor slowly stepped forward next. "I should never have assumed you did not belong here," he admitted. One of the receptionists wiped away a quiet tear before speaking. "We saw your clothes before we saw your humanity. I am deeply sorry." Nathan listened without interruption. When everyone had finished, he looked around the lobby once more. "This evening has never been about me," he said. "If I had walked through those doors wearing an expensive suit, none of this would have happened. The real question is what would have happened to someone who truly had nowhere else to go tonight." His words settled over the room with quiet weight. Several guests lowered their eyes. Even members of the executive team reflected silently on the question. Nathan continued. "A hotel is not measured by the thread count of its sheets or the height of its chandeliers. It is measured by whether a tired traveler feels respected before receiving a room key." Richard nodded slowly. "Those words should be printed in every employee handbook we own." Nathan smiled faintly. "Words alone are never enough. Culture is built by daily choices." He then looked toward the executives standing beside Richard. "Effective immediately, I want a complete review of this property's guest service records, employee evaluations, and complaint history. I also want interviews conducted with every staff member, including those who were not on duty tonight. We will separate isolated mistakes from repeated patterns. Fairness requires facts, not assumptions." Richard immediately replied, "It will be done." Nathan turned toward Michael once more. "And I would like someone to remember the employee who chose compassion even after being instructed otherwise." Michael looked genuinely overwhelmed. "Sir, I was only trying to help." Nathan smiled warmly. "That is exactly why you were helping the company more than you realized." Lily slipped her small hand into her father's and looked up at him with quiet pride. "Daddy," she whispered, "I think Mommy would be happy with you today." Nathan's eyes softened for just a moment as he gently squeezed her hand. "I hope so, sweetheart," he answered. "I truly hope so." Nathan stood quietly for another moment before turning toward Richard. His voice remained calm, carrying the same steady dignity that had guided every word he had spoken that evening. "Richard, after reviewing everything we have witnessed tonight, I have reached my decision." Every employee held their breath. Daniel Mercer looked down at the marble floor. Trevor stood perfectly still. The receptionists silently waited, knowing that whatever came next would shape the rest of their careers. Nathan continued without raising his voice. "Effective immediately, Daniel Mercer, Trevor, and every employee who knowingly participated in denying honest hospitality through prejudice or deliberate dishonesty will be relieved of their current positions. Human Resources will conduct individual exit meetings with fairness, professionalism, and respect." No one argued. No one protested. They understood that the decision had not come from anger. It had come from accountability. Nathan paused before adding, "However, this company will never celebrate another person's failure. Every departing employee will be treated with dignity throughout the transition. I expect that standard to be followed without exception." Richard nodded. "It will be done exactly as you have instructed." Nathan then turned toward Michael. "Michael, beginning tomorrow morning, you will begin leadership development training under our guest experience division. Compassion cannot be taught as easily as technical skills. Tonight you demonstrated the quality that matters most. Michael's eyes filled with grateful disbelief. Thank you, sir. I will work every day to deserve your trust. Nathan smiled warmly. I believe you already have. He then looked toward the elderly woman who had offered Lily a peppermint candy. She was preparing to leave quietly when Nathan walked over and gently shook her hand. Thank you for reminding everyone here what genuine hospitality looks like. She smiled with kind eyes. Young man, kindness has a funny way of finding its way back home. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. Yes, ma'am. It always does. Richard approached with a newly prepared room key enclosed inside a simple black leather holder. Mr. Brooks, he said with quiet respect, Suite 1 has been prepared for you and Lily whenever you are ready. Nathan accepted the key but did not immediately move. Instead, he looked around the magnificent lobby one final time. The marble floors still gleamed beneath the crystal chandeliers. The fireplace still offered quiet warmth. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving only clear reflections beneath the entrance lights. Nothing about the building had changed, yet everything about its spirit had. Nathan gently took Lily's hand, and together they walked toward the elevators. As they passed the front desk, every remaining employee stood respectfully. No one had been instructed to do so. It simply felt right. One young receptionist who had not been involved quietly spoke the words that should have been spoken from the very beginning. Welcome home, Mr. Brooks. Nathan stopped for only a moment. He looked at her with a gentle smile and answered, Thank you. More importantly, let us make sure every guest who walks through these doors feels that same welcome, whether we know their name or not. The elevator doors opened softly. Nathan and Lily stepped inside together. As the doors slowly closed, Lily slipped her hand into her father's and looked up with a peaceful smile. Daddy, she whispered, I think this hotel is going to be a happier place. Nathan looked down at her with quiet pride. It will be, sweetheart, because buildings never change people. People choose to change themselves. The elevator doors closed, leaving behind a lobby filled not with fear or embarrassment, but with reflection. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Respect is never earned by wealth, titles, or appearances. It is revealed by how we treat the person standing quietly in front of us when we believe no one important is watching.